Good afternoon, everyone. The meeting will now come to order. Hello, I'm Donna Sivigny, President of the Board of Education, and I would like to welcome you to the May 20th, 2020 special board meeting. In keeping with the board's commitment to open communication with the community, this meeting is being streamed live on the CCPS website at www.carrollk12.org and broadcast live on Channel 21. We are also recording this meeting so that it can be accessed on demand on our website and broadcast throughout the month on Channel 21. Due to the coronavirus pandemic impacting our county and community, the Board of Education will continue to conduct our meetings in a virtual format until the pandemic abates and the appropriate restrictions that are in place are lifted. Unfortunately, these adjustments do not make it possible for live public participation during the meetings. Citizens may watch the meeting live on Channel 21 or our website, but do not have the opportunity to speak during the meeting. The board, however, remains very interested in receiving public input on the topics we discuss. Therefore, we encourage citizens to provide comments to the board via email. Alternatively, citizens may send written comments to the board through the U.S. mail. For board members and staff who are participating in the virtual meeting, I would remind us all to silence our cell phones and other devices around us that the microphones may pick up. Also, we should each silence our microphones when we are not speaking. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Okay, board members, I need a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Battaglia and seconded by Dr. Dorsey. Any revisions or comments, board members? No? Okay, then with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, can I get a verbal aye, please?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And section 2 is the public participation section. And Dr. Lockard, I would will ask if we did receive any feedback that folks had requested that we post.
For this meeting, I have not received any. I will double check with Ms. Gaddis. She usually tells me if we do, but I don't believe we have for the update meeting.
Okay. All right.
Again, we receive lots of emails, and feedback from parents. I did not receive anything that specifically said, please include this in the public comment section, but I will double check that to be sure. If there is, it would be then posted at the spot on our website.
And I would reiterate that we've received many emails from community members, and primarily on the topics that we're about to discuss tonight as part of our update. So just like we had said at the last meeting, we hadn't received any that specifically requested posting, but please know that we are very interested in that feedback, and we're all reading every email that we get. So I want to thank the community for continuing to provide that feedback and their thoughts on the various topics that we're facing right now.
Yes, and Ms. Gaddis just confirmed with me that none specific requested to be posted for this public comment section. So thank you.
All right, thank you. So with that, we'll move on to section 3 for discussion, and the first item up is the COVID-19 impact updates, and with the first one being graduation plans. So with that, Dr. Lockard, I'll shoot it over to you to start it off.
Thank you, Ms. Sivigny, and board members and staff and Jackson, students and families. I think it goes without saying again how challenging this whole situation has been on, our way of doing business and the traditions and things we've known and loved. Growing up ourselves, and then seeing our kids matriculate through school. And as I've said all along, we don't want this situation to diminish the accomplishments of our students. You know, the achievement that's been made in their educational journeys, the friends that they've made, the memories that they've created. You know, COVID-19 is not going to stop that. Those things will live with our students. And like I said, we want to make sure that we find some way to recognize, particularly our seniors, for this important milestone in their life. And we have been struggling with this. We didn't come right out of the gate in early April and make a decision because we wanted to see what was going to happen. We wanted to see where would things go. We wanted to get as much information as we could and do everything that we're able to do. As you know, we've been consulting on just about everything that we do as it relates to anybody coming to our campus or coming in our building or any kind of function with our health department. Our partners here in Carroll County, who will take their direction also from the Maryland Department of Health and the governor's executive orders. So please know that that's been a big part of any decision making that we've been making, and we can't just make that in a vacuum. We have to look to those folks and follow the executive orders that are in place. And so I did ask for Ed Singer, director of our Carroll County Health Department, to be on the call tonight to talk a little bit about that. We are prepared to share with the board some alternative plans for graduation ceremonies, but we know that there's questions, and we know that Ed Singer has he has been an extremely busy person. Well, he typically is, but the last few months for sure. And so I wanted to make sure Ed had a chance to field any questions, to share his perspective on our approach here, what we can and can't do. Eric King, our high school director, has been working with a group of students from each high school, our principals and administrative teams. He's been soliciting and receiving all kinds of feedback. I should say receiving all kinds of feedback mostly, and responding to emails and such that he's gotten. So he has some perspective too. So I don't want to keep going. I want those folks to get a chance to talk. I want board members to get a chance to ask questions and provide comment. But know that you know, it's been challenging, and I don't want folks to perceive that we haven't looked at all these things or tried to look at all these things and do what we can. But we do have to operate within the parameters that we've been given. And I'll say one more time, in the end, while we'd all love to have a traditional graduation ceremony or something even close to that, I don't want our students' accomplishments to be diminished. They won't be in my eyes. The incredible work that they've done, the incredible accomplishments they've made, again, all those things that you can't take away, the friendships, the opportunities, the participation in the clubs and sports and extracurriculars or student board reps. So with that, I'll stop there. Mr. Singer, are you on the line here?
Yeah, Superintendent, I'm here. I guess, yeah, I'll just start off by saying I certainly recognize the accomplishments and the importance of graduation to all the students and to the family members, because probably one of the most important, I guess, milestones in a young person's life. And I certainly don't take any of this very, very lightly. It's I've lived in Carroll County almost my entire life, and I've heard from a lot of people in the community, and a lot of them disagree with me, and a lot of them disagree with where the governor stands and that type of thing. But I guess I just want to give you a little bit of background. And first of all, I think there was a misunderstanding at one point in time that graduations were somehow exempt from the governor's executive order. And the executive order is still very clear that large gatherings of more than 10 people are not allowed under the current executive order, except for those specific things are exempt. The churches, for instance, are exempt. And I reached out to church leaders and said I thought that it was kind of a really bad idea if they had large church gatherings without considering some additional guidance that's posted out on the governor's website. But they're not prohibited under the executive order. However, graduation activities where groups of more than 10 would gather are prohibited under that requirement. And while the governor's given local health officers and local elected officials some leeway in having flexibility with his executive order, that leeway is essentially to those jurisdictions that want to have more restrictive requirements than what are in his executive order. We really don't have the ability to liberalize or rescind any of the measures that are required in his current executive order. And I've been in constant conversation with my fellow health officers and the Maryland State Police and their legal counsel about what the legal requirements are as far as these large gatherings. So we really don't have an option. And I also wanted to add, I guess, just, the superintendent and I have talked a little bit about this, and if the governor stays consistent with his plan, I know some of the board members had asked me about, well, what do you think? We push this off till later in the summer, but if the governor stays consistent with his plan, large gatherings like this would be really prohibited until we get to phase 3, and that's not happening for several months. So I really think it would be unrealistic. If you all as a board would want to try to schedule something for later in the summer, that's certainly your prerogative, but you may be stuck in the same place we are now, where you may not be able to do it because the governor may not have relaxed things enough for you to have a graduation ceremony anyway. So, it'd be really easy, and I guess I want to add this, it'd be really easy for me just to sit here and say, no, you can't do it because the governor's order says you can't. But I do think it'd be irresponsible of me not to at least share my opinion as the county health officer. And I really think a large gathering of this type would really be inappropriate at this point in time. COVID-19 spreading in our community, and my concern isn't so much as the gathering that we might have as far as what it would look like if we put a bunch of students in a stadium and we spaced them out and you had enough people that you could control the interactions there and all, but it's more of what we would see in the parking lot before and afterwards, where these students haven't seen each other for months, would obviously be very emotional. And there's absolutely no way I think that you're going to be able to keep social distance between students at something like this, regardless of the executive order. I'm also concerned that many of our students live with elderly parents or grandparents, a lot of them with grandparents these days, and they're at much higher risk. We've also got students with underlying health conditions. And while, a lot of the folks who are young aren't as much at risk as our vulnerable populations, there is this inflammatory disease that's going around. And just recently, a 15-year-old in Baltimore County died last week. So I do think it's important, while you guys have the interest of the students' education at heart and whatnot, I also know that the safety and health of your students is also something that's very much in the forefront for the education institution and the Board of Education. So that said, I really, regardless of where we are with the governor's executive order, there's no way that I feel that I could recommend to you having a traditional type graduation. So while I understand this is very difficult for you all, and I don't believe the board has it has an easy thing to deal with here in deciding on what would be most appropriate for our graduates, I really don't think you have an ethical or a legal opportunity to actually decide to do something different than some non-traditional type of graduation. So if you all have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And, I know a lot of folks in the community are upset with me because they seem to think that I should be able to change this and make it what they want it to be. And I'm willing to take the heat for my opinion, and I don't think it's appropriate at this point in time. But I also need you to realize that even if we wanted to, there's not a lot of sense in discussing this because legally it can't be done.
So Ed, thank you for those comments. Board members, do you have questions for Ed? Kenny, I have a feeling you have some questions that you'd like to ask.
Yes, and Mr. Singer, I'm not going to be too mad at you because I know you're a veteran and a wrestler and you'd probably hurt me, but with this virtual stuff, I can get a little loud. and I understand what you're saying. My disappointment is state level. There's other states that have summer school going to happen. There's other states having graduations happen. And my big concern is where we're going to be in August and September that we can have schools open. And I understand, and I think everybody's aware of it. The legislator sent you a letter. You responded with a letter. And like you said, this is an emotional issue. And everybody's got their feelings. And again, I've heard for the last 2 months, you know, we can go to Walmart and stand in line and rub shoulders, but we can't vote. We can't have a graduation. We can't do other things. And I'm not sure I understand. Some of the state guidelines seem to have a lot of gaps and a lot of inconsistencies. And I think one of the things that stirs up this stuff so much is we hear from the state, well, it's up to the counties. Well, it really isn't. I think you made a good point. It's up to the county within the guidelines they were given. And then the other thing I'd like Dr. Lockard and Mr. Singer to maybe share briefly. You guys talk with each other a lot. You guys talk with the state superintendent a lot. You talk with state people a lot. I mean, in the last couple months, how many times have you guys sought out guidance from above?
I can share. I had in the beginning 2 to 3 times weekly conversations with state superintendent and all the other superintendents were on those calls. I was just on another call today. We're always seeking guidance, Mr. Kiler, asking for guidance, asking for affirmation.
And I guess I'll chime in, and it's been great working with the superintendent and all of the staff. We work together on a regular basis, so it's not like we don't know each other. I mean, before we were dealing with COVID-19, we were all focusing on what we could do with the school system to help make a major end of this, try to make an end of this opioid crisis that we're dealing with. And we deal with all types of behavioral health issues and public health issues related to the school system. And we're always working very well together. But as things started to happen, you know, the superintendent and I were probably talking to each other on almost a daily basis when this was first getting going. Once schools closed, we didn't have to talk as much because we didn't have daily issues we were trying to figure out what we were going to do about. But, you know, there's a great relationship here between the health department and the school system. We partner on many different things. But at the state level, the health officers are having calls on every other day with folks from Maryland Department of Health. The attorneys are on the call, the state police. And I will tell you, Kenny, that the guidance that's coming out is very inconsistent. And I'm really concerned about the large gatherings at churches, even maybe more so than I would be concerned about a graduation gathering. A lot of the churches are doing the right thing, though. We've had discussion with the local religious leaders and whatnot, and they're trying to make sure they keep their congregations safe. So there's a lot of discussion. And the one thing that I thought was kind of funny, because I thought when we were talking about graduations, there was a guidance that went out to the state police not to enforce the stay-at-home order, which was essentially don't enforce if people are going to like a drive-through graduation or if they're going to a virtual graduation, that they weren't to enforce the fact that people were traveling for a reason that wasn't allowed under the executive order. I thought that gave flexibility to superintendents to approve graduations essentially however they would want to. But when I got into it, no, that wasn't the interpretation. It only had to do with the travel to and from whatever type of alternative ceremony was being planned, because I was really confused. Talked to my colleague up in Garrett County, and I said at the time they only had 2 or 4 cases, and I said, so are you getting a lot of pressure to do a full-scale graduation up there? And he said, no, because we can't. And I said, what? And it was only at that point in time that I realized the interpretive guidance that the state police were given from their legal counsel was that it's not allowed under the executive order. So yes, there is a lot of inconsistency in some of the things that are out there. And I realize there's a lot of pressure on the governor and a lot of other elected officials. People want you've got a large number of people who want things opened up, and you've got another group that are on the other side that are equally concerned that this isn't going to be safe and protective enough. And somehow we've got to meet in the middle. And I'm concerned that this is, really a difficult situation that's tearing our community apart. And we've got to do the best we can to manage it, given the situation that we have at hand. And unfortunately, sitting here before you guys as a board tonight, your hands are tied to that extent. But again, as I mentioned, it'd be easy for me to hide behind the executive order and say that's the only reason we shouldn't do this. I also think there are good public health reasons that we really shouldn't be getting this larger group of folks together. So I appreciate, Mr. Kiler, your comments, and I understand that it's very difficult for everybody, and there's nothing I can do because everybody also thinks that I have this magic crystal ball or this magic connection to the governor's office. And a lot of times we're not hearing what he's going to decide until the day that, almost all the time, until the day they have their press conference. So while we're coordinating very much with the folks at the state level and the superintendent and everybody else here locally, we don't have any more insight on what's coming next than anybody else does.
Thanks, guys. And Donna, if I can say one more thing here, and then I'll be quiet till everybody else gets done. Number one, I'm biased. I think the Carroll County Public Schools have been ahead of the curve on this. They were ahead on the virtual learning. They've done the best they can with the hand they're dealt. This is very frustrating. On the other side of things, again, moving forward, and Ed and I have had this discussion, he brought up opioids. There's more deaths from ODs in Carroll County than there is non-nursing home deaths from coronavirus. I grew up in Carroll County, and a lot of you guys did, and we had field parties and such. People are getting together. The ones that think they don't get together to this magnitude, as old as I am, Rhonda and I get invited to happy hours in a farm building that have 40 people there for 2-3 hours. And trust me, they're not wearing masks and they're not staying 5 foot apart. I think, and again, I do agree with your last comments. We don't have a lot of choice with this. And I don't want to get into blaming anyone. I don't think that accomplishes anything. I want to get into moving forward and us try to get some of these rules opened up so we can get our kids back in the classroom in front of teachers where they belong. Thank you, guys.
Donna, may I speak next?
Go right ahead, Miss Herbert.
Okay. First of all, Mr. Singer, I do want to thank you for taking my call on Monday, and that was not about school. It was about horse shows. And I don't want to hide behind this, and I don't want anybody to take this personally. But I think I can safely say that I've been to more graduations than anyone here on this virtual call due to my prior job and due to my age. So it is a culminating activity. And after 13 years, wow, this is tough. I can't imagine not having my child walk across the stage and all my friends and family be there. I know we can't do that, but when I go to Lowe's and see that parking lot full on Saturday, and I won't go, when I go to Walmart and people aren't running you over like they were, but they still will butt in front of you to get milk or bread, I just can't understand that concept. Or going to a large church gathering, I cannot understand that people are upset, and I think the Naval Academy graduates this week, and I know they'll be on that field, and I know all of our administration, including Dr. Lockard, have done a wonderful job of trying to figure this out. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I know they can have a choice if they think it's unsafe. I get it. I'm 68. I'm not in that young group. But it seems like it's a normal day out there in Carroll County now, and I just have a really tough time doing that. I want to get schools open. I want live board meetings. And I don't know where we go from there. I don't think I have people behind me to make a motion for Ed to look into this. But I am telling you, I have had lots and lots of emails. I have had many texts. I have people come to me, please, Ms. Herbert, I want to see my child go across the stage. So it's a big thing. It really is. 13 years of a culminating activity, and it's just very, very difficult. And I want to do anything that we can for these students to do it the right way. And I was hoping we can, and I don't know if anybody else is interested in looking into this or not. Mr. Singer, I understand you have a job to do, and I don't know, but it really has a hard time when you walk around Carroll County and you see it going like a normal day.
So, Ms. Battaglia, you look like you have something you'd like to say.
I always look like I have something to say. Mr. Singer, I first want to say, I'm sure your job is not easy at all. I mean, with everything that has been happening ever since, our kids were last in school on March 13th, this has been a very difficult, trying time for many, for families and for students. My heart really hurts for our seniors and for those families. This is the one time that they look forward to. I mean, the beginning of this, the very first day of their senior year, look forward to everything that goes forward from that time. And to have this ripped out from underneath of them, this is no one's fault. No one had anything to do with this. No one saw this coming. No one saw any of these things that were going to happen. I know you're saying we can't have our traditional, and I understand that, and I think a lot of families understand that we can't have our traditionals. Mr. Singer, you're appointed to your position, and then you have a boss. As a board member, my bosses are the parents. They're my bosses. That's how I look at it. The students, they are my boss, and I'm hearing from them that they want something. They want something that is special. It could be different, whether it's a drive-through, whether it's we can somehow split the classes up by their alphabets to do something. Like Marsha said, the grocery stores, there's 300 people in the grocery stores, and they're not following any of the guidelines. They might be wearing a mask, but they're not following the aisles. They're all right up against you with their carts when they're at checkout. The parking lots are packed. I still work out in the public, and I see it every single day, how people still interact. It's just a lot of these things don't make sense. And, if we can have the Naval Academy or the Air Force Academy be 6 foot apart on a field, there's got to be some other way to do it. And the Naval Academy is right there in Annapolis. I'm sorry, but they're a stone throw away from the governor's mansion. There's got to be something we can do. Whether it's the parents sign a waiver, whether it's, it's the option to participate in some way, but our seniors and their families definitely deserve this time, and they deserve to have that 15-second moment where they get to walk across the stage and have that sense of pride, because it's only a one-time feeling. You'll feel it if you go to college, but it is that one-time feeling where you're like, I've accomplished this. So, I just hope that we can definitely come to some type of conclusion that honors our seniors the best way that they deserve to be honored.
So if I could,
Donna, I don't know if you want me to comment on any of this, or if you want Steve to go ahead, or how you want to handle it.
I was just going to make a couple comments, and then Ed, go ahead. And I know there's other board members that want to talk. Just to clarify, not that I'm trying to whatever. I do think the the Naval Academy graduation is a virtual one, I believe. I believe they announced that a while back. That's neither here nor there. I just want to mention that. And then we are prepared, Ms. Battaglia, to the point you were making. We are prepared to. We have been working, like I said, with Mr. Singer throughout this. Ms. McCabe, Mr. King are prepared to share what we'd like to try to do moving forward tonight. So I do want, Ed, if you want to reply to Ms. Battaglia, but then what other board members chime in for sure.
Whoops, I keep clicking myself on and off. Yeah, I don't want to take up a bunch of time. I do want to say that I do think the military graduations are really a very different situation. As you've essentially got folks who are now commissioned officers in the military, and there's a level of discipline there that's expected and can so easily be enforced. But and it's not to say that our kids aren't good kids. It's just that I think it's an entirely different type of situation that we're talking about there. And the stores, well, I get it, and I've avoided the stores because they are so crowded. When we're doing our contact tracing, that's one of the big things we're doing is things are reopening up, is if somebody's sick. Close contact has to do with how long you've been within a 6-foot distance of a particular individual. And if it hasn't been for a significant amount of time, such as passing in the store, we don't consider you to be exposed. So I kind of just wanted to point that out, that it is a different situation. Most of the time, even if you're brushing up against people or whatever in the stores, it is just passing contact that you're having, as opposed to having close contact with somebody in these retail spaces. And I get it that, you know, right now it's a bit of a madhouse, and we try to do everything we can to control that. But personally, I've been avoiding some of the retail spaces just because of the issues that you guys have talked about.
So, Ed, I appreciate your comments again. Is it possible for you to stay on the line for a little bit as we open up a little bit of the discussion of what we are talking about, what the school system is proposing that we do for graduations, and so we can ask questions?
Yeah, I can stay. I'm supposed to have a call at 6 with the hospital, but I'm free until 6 o'clock.
Okay. And I didn't want to, Dr. Dorsey, I didn't know if you had anything specific that you wanted to say.
Oh, I tell you what, as it's already been said, how challenging and painful and emotional this whole situation is. Again, my thanks to Mr. Singer for leading the charge. And again, I know one thing: people don't like to be told what they can't do. I know that. So again, you know, that just makes your job that much more, difficult to deal with. But again, I just know that graduation certainly is extremely important. I can remember years ago when I was still principal at Friendship Valley. It was kindergarten orientation day, and I remember greeting the students and the parents who were coming into kindergarten that year. And before going to the cafeteria to greet everyone, I realized that this was going to be the class of 2020. So one of my opening comments was to say, "Welcome to the class of 2020." And of course, back then, that just sounded like sometime way out in the eons that we probably never ever get to. So, you know, it got some chuckles and all. But anyway, I have students, former students. I've got family members. I've got a host of friends who are having students and students themselves in this class of 2020. So I know that there's nothing more than we'd like to do than be a part of greeting you personally and congratulating you, celebrating your accomplishments. But again, it just can't happen the way it's happened in the past, and I understand that. Last year was my first year as a board member with the opportunity to attend graduations, and I attended all of the high school graduations, the gateway graduations, and again, you just get such a sense of pride from the students and the parents, and you know, it's like we all just sort of congratulate the students and say, "Look, you've done it, congratulations," and we like to send them off with our well wishes. So again, I was certainly looking forward to being a part of the graduations as we had them last year, this year. But again, we're not at that point. And having been in the school system, I know one of our big charges is to keep our children, our students, safe. So we have to be concerned about the safety of the students and the children. And over the years, again, it's been the health department that leads the charge with telling us, how we should go about doing that. So again, it's very painful and emotional that we won't have the opportunity to greet the class of 2020 as we greeted the class in the past. But again, I know that you do have some plans that you'll be sharing with us tonight, so we can look at an alternate way of congratulating the students and sending them off. I appreciate Dr. Lockard's comments. I mean, we're still going to celebrate their accomplishments. We're still proud of them. And we really, we're all very, very sorry that we can't have them go through this rite of passage as students in the past. Again, having been in the school system, the spring of the year was the time that all students look forward to. I mean, you've got your play days, your field days, your different field trips and activities, and for the ones in the upper levels, the dances and proms. Again, I'm just sorry that all of that has been missed this spring. But again, we have to be concerned about the health and safety of our students. So without getting any more emotional, I'll just thank you for giving me those moments to share those comments. And again, we just look forward to what plan is going to be proposed for congratulating the class of 2020.
Thanks, Dr. Dorsey. And Jackson, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I wanted to check in with you and see if you had some comments that you wanted to make and give us the student perspective on this whole thing.
Well, a lot of kids are frustrated, obviously, and the signs were a very nice gesture, but to some of them it's very vain, doesn't really matter much to them because they're being robbed of a spring sports season, walking across the stage, or any other number of various senior activities. So students are very frustrated. Some students are frustrated by distance learning, so it's very tough right now for a lot of students right now. But they're working on it. They understand that these are very unique times, but they can't help their frustration with that. So.
And we clearly we feel for them with all the comments from the board members. And I'd like to ask our Ed, Mr. O'Mealy, a lot of the comments were around, there were a lot of inconsistencies in the executive order and what we are capable of doing versus not capable of doing. And if you had looked at the executive order and if you're in agreement with, is your interpretive guidance similar to what we're hearing from other directions that, we're really not allowed to do more than 10 folks at an outdoor gathering in an effort to try to get something a little bit closer to a traditional graduation?
Well, Mrs. Sivigny, I have read both letters, the letter prepared by the delegation and the letter prepared by Mr. Singer. And, I think that both sides raise points, and I think we're at the stage where it would be appropriate to perhaps send a letter to the Governor's Office of Legal Counsel. And they have been providing interpretive guidance on each of the executive orders. And, without, taking one stand or the other, I think that it's a fair question to say, look, one body has raised this issue, another body has expressed a different opinion, and we're somewhere caught in between, and we need something definitive. It doesn't matter what I may say, but the Office of Legal Counsel is the body to offer that type of interpretive guidance, and I think that with the board's permission, I would be happy to send a letter tomorrow seeking that guidance with the hope that we get something definitive that puts the matter to rest one way or the other, so that we can plan accordingly.
Board members, how do you feel about that? I mean, I know that at this point, we've got to make a decision, right? I mean, to Dr. Lockard's comments earlier, you had pushed making the decision as late as possible to try to see what the current state of opening was. And I'm not sure that we have a lot more time at this point. I mean, do we need to pull the trigger on the decision tonight? If we were able to get some interpretive guidance, I guess what I'm asking for is there still enough time to do anything with that if we got an answer that was maybe different than what we were expecting?
Donna, I would be for this, but Ed, what timeline do you think? Because I just want to do whatever we can for these students at Carroll County Public Schools.
Well, I can have a letter that goes out by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I've already got a draft written. And I could also place a call to the chief counsel, and if he's willing to talk with me, I'll frame the issues and express the need for an expedited review. Obviously, this is an issue that needs to be done definitively within a very short period of time so that you can plan accordingly. I know that in some counties, the commencements are taking place this week.
Right, and I understand that. So, and no offense to Dr. Lockard, I know we got a plan in place, but I would like to pursue this, and I make a motion that we go ahead and have Ed pursue that. There you go, Donna.
Okay,
could I add one thing before the motion? And that is, I appreciate Mr. O'Mealy's comments, seeking that clarification again. Ed Singer has provided us his clarification. I know the questions from the board, and seeking that clarification through Ed O'Mealy, through our legal counsel. What I would recommend, though, is we are on a short timeline, and I don't know how long it's going to take, Mr. O'Mealy, for you to get information back. I would ask the board to consider letting us share alternative plans, and beginning to, walk down that path. And if we get some different interpretation back, then fine. And we can try to turn from there. But if it's going to be another week or two, I'm afraid that's time that's lost. And you are correct. Other systems are working through their alternative plans for graduation as we speak. And our seniors typically end a little bit earlier than all our other students. I'd like to try to honor that tradition for them as well. I'm sure they'd appreciate that. And not hanging on to kind of find out if we're beyond a place where timing doesn't allow us to do even alternative plans. I don't want to get to that point. I wouldn't let that happen. I'm just saying, I think for us to try to keep the ball moving, and if we get different direction, then that's great.
And I understand that, Dr. Lockard, and that's fine. And I know you all have really worked hard on getting this done, but I still want that letter for our students at Carroll County Public Schools. But by all means, I want you to explain to everybody. But I still am going to make a motion after this.
And that's what I was going to ask Mrs. Herbert. Can we hear the whole presentation of what they've got offered, what they've got, the dates? And that may, who knows, that may bend us on how strongly we feel about the letter, or it might change what we really want the letter to ask for.
Absolutely.
You okay with that?
Thank you. Oh, absolutely.
And the other thing,
never let me second anything anyway, so I didn't have a chance.
the other thing I was thinking, Mrs. Herbert, maybe tied to your motion, maybe we could sort of put a time limit on it. Like if we can get an answer back by a certain point.
I think that makes sense, Dr. Dorsey. Why don't we go ahead and have Dr. Lockard and staff tell us exactly what the plans are that they're working with right now, and then we can make a motion on exactly how we want to move forward with timeframes and alternate plan A, plan B, things like that. Does that make sense for everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. So
we need to remember that we're going to lose Mr. Singer pretty soon. So particularly if you guys have questions for him through this process, we ought to get it going.
Well, and I'm going to see if the hospital really needs to meet tonight or not. I'll send them a text message and maybe I can stay longer. But I did want to chime in and say, I didn't share with you just kind of my own opinion on the governor's executive order. They have a liaison, Sergeant Nelson, who we go through to work with the governor's office of legal counsel. And he's the one that's where they're kind of getting their guidance from. I'm not going to discourage you guys from sending them a letter, but I think this question's already been asked and answered, so it should be one that the governor's office should be able to come back to you on rather quickly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Singer. Do we want Ms. Sivigny then to, I'll turn things to Ms. McCabe and Mr. King to talk about alternative graduation plans at this point? Okay.
Please do.
Good evening. I just wanted to reiterate that we've been waiting, and during that waiting, we've been planning. And so I'm going to share with you the plans that we've come up with that will honor our seniors while keeping safety and health precautions at the very top of our concern. As Mr. King and others have met with students, and we've gotten input from parents and others, that we've heard over and over again is the importance of having plan for our graduations. And so I'm going to go into detail about how we're going to plan to get that
switch user
as how we're going to try to keep the health concerns as a top priority during the process. So each student is going to be able to have a designated time to come into their school to walk across that stage. They will be able to bring 4 guests with them, and we will have the school staffed so that there are folks in the parking lots. The doors will all be open, so no doors will need to be touched by students or families. And everything will be staffed to make sure that the process goes smoothly from one student and their family to the next. So the principal will be on the stage. We will also have someone on or near the stage reading the names as we would in a regular graduation, and we'll have the diplomas. We'll also have someone running the video camera in the auditorium, and that video camera will capture all of our students walking across the stage. So the students will be given their cap and gown, and that's being done, that was started on Monday of this week, as seniors start to return their belongings or return things that belong to the school, and the schools can return the students' belongings. So students are starting the process now of receiving their cap and gown. They'll be able to wear that as they cross the stage, as their name is called. They will, when they walk the stage, there will be a table on the stage that has the diplomas. They'll pick up their diploma, they'll stop, and on either side of the table will be the student and the principal that will give that appropriate distance. And at that point, their families will be able to take photographs of the student and the principal, and then they'll leave the stage, they'll exit the auditorium, again, ushered out by a staff member, and they'll be ushered out to a place where they can take extra pictures with their family members, and then they'll be ushered out to the parking lot. So, so the way that we want this to work in each school is that there will be a way to enter the building and a way to exit the building, so that people don't come in contact with one another, so that the family who's in there first will come in, graduate, and leave without coming into contact with the next family who's coming in. So every school will then have a video of their graduation, and that video will include an address from Dr. Lockard, an address from their school principal, their valedictorian speech, and then they'll get to see each student crossing the stage in a graduation ceremony. So every student will have, everyone will have a video to watch. Those will be posted on our website, and they'll be sent out as well to all the seniors and their families. So, as I said, in putting that walk across the stage at the center of our concern for students, we feel that we were able to do that in a way that honors the student and gives them that experience that we want all seniors to have, and they get to do it in front of their family. And then they will also get the chance to be able to watch their friends walk across that stage when they watch the video. So that's what we have planned for graduation at this time. Does anyone have any questions that I could answer or Mr. King could answer?
So is there guidance on exactly how many family members each one of the graduating seniors can bring with them?
Yes, each senior can bring 4 guests with them, 4 guests or 4 family members. In that way, we make sure that when they're entering the building and entering that auditorium, that we're keeping proper social distance and we're keeping less than 10 people together at any one time.
Cindy, what's the time frame? Like for each student, they're given how much time to actually enter the parking lot, the building, and process through?
Once they hit that auditorium, they're probably only going to be in the auditorium for about 5 or 10 minutes. It's going to be quick. Once they get into that auditorium, we've got, as you know, a lot of students to get through the process. And so, you know, especially at some of our larger high schools like Westminster High, you know, we're going to probably be doing this for 3 to 4 days in order to get all of the students through.
So where does the social distancing start for a student and their families?
So the social distance, like I said, we'll have a staff member in the parking lot, you know, making sure that social distancing is observed there. And then we will have someone at the front door. The door will be propped open, and we'll have a staff member usher that family into the auditorium. So the whole processional will be controlled to make sure that there's no area that collects a lot of people. Plus, as I said, we're going to be on a tight timetable to get everyone through in an appropriate amount of time anyway. And the poor principal will be on the stage for 3 or 4 days. So,
how are we starting during the day? And I mean, is it going until?
We'll probably go from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock every day with a lunch break and a couple of other breaks in the day. I know that the principals and the staff are, you know, they're going to be excited to do this, and they're going to be excited to see the students and excited to celebrate with them in this kind of graduation. So, so yeah,
and we're going to start this as soon as we can. It's probably, we're still tying up some loose ends, but we're probably going to start around June 1st.
And Ms. McCabe, can this be live streamed so that, you know, folks can tell all of their friends and family, you know, what is the window that they're going to be there, and you know, more family and friends could watch it happening live?
We thought about that, but the reason that we decided to go with videotaping it and then playing it back is that even though we're going to try to have these tight timetables, we are afraid that we're not going, that if we get off that timetable, or that we have some kind of, you know, any issue that happens in any building, we're going to be,
and then we'll be way off in times. So that's kind of why we shied away from live streaming, to make sure that that we didn't have people waiting around and, you know, waiting too long to see a student go across the stage.
And you've answered a couple of my questions already with the multiple days. Will they all happen at the same, will all the high schools be doing it the same days?
Some will and some won't, because we have to have people who, we have to have professionals who are running the video cameras and things like that. We have to have the professional equipment to do this with. Most likely we'll have probably, you know, 2 schools going at one time, and then maybe another 2. This is probably going to take a couple of weeks to get everybody done.
Okay, so and that's what I was thinking. It's probably going to be more than a week. And
Yeah.
So each graduate would get, we need you there Monday at 10:15, and be prepared to wait in case things are going on, that kind of a deal.
Right.
So it's not that you're going to be giving the, you know, 10 students a 20-minute window, right? And you're going to take those through. It's each student individually gets a 10-minute window?
Yes, every
Appointment time, and that's the time when we anticipate them being able to enter the building and go into the auditorium and then be able to cross the stage.
And when did you say, Cindy, you were going to start this?
We're going to try to start it around June 1st.
All right. I would also like to know then the way you're setting this up, and I just thought about that from being a teacher. I know you see those kids like the last 4 years in high school, and you want to see them graduate too. So, but they cannot sit spread apart in the auditorium, correct?
Right. I mean,
I'm just trying to make this work.
I know.
Okay.
We're trying, even in the auditorium, to just have, you know, 10 people or less in there at any one time. And I know that's hard for everybody involved because everybody wants to see the student cross the stage, you know, including their teachers.
And I cannot thank you enough for all the hard work you've done and your team. But after everybody finishes, I'm still going to make a motion just to see for a last chance that we can do something for our students.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's just heartbreaking.
Jackson, what do you think of this?
Well, it's definitely better than nothing. And I think some students are absolutely going to appreciate it. And some students aren't going to particularly care for it. I am worried about some parents maybe not being able to get off work at the appointed time, which would be very unfortunate. And so for as many issues as you might feel it has, it is probably the best we're going to be able to do. given the current situation. And I think we just have to run with that.
One thing I can add here is that we're going to try to use sign-up software like Sign Up Genius or something like that, so that parents can choose a time that will be good for them and whoever else they want to bring. That's a really good point.
I think that would be very helpful.
Right, we definitely don't want to put it at a time when folks absolutely can't make it. I mean, that defeats the whole purpose. So I think using a Sign Up Genius or something like that is a really good idea. Cindy, is there? So I know you said that the principal is going to be on stage for the entire time. Is there going to be any exchange of information, or is are the diplomas going to be sitting on a table that the students just grab, or?
Yes, the plan is to have the diplomas on the table, and the student would come up onto the stage, take the diploma, and then stand on that one side of the table with the principal on the other end of the table, and have their family be able to take that picture while the video camera is still running. And then they would walk off the stage and out of the auditorium to another place to take some family photos.
Okay.
So
there won't be any handshaking or exchange of anything. It's simply that everything's going to be out and.
Right.
Okay. And when we say diploma, that's in quotes, right? Because.
Yeah, it's really the diploma cover.
The diploma cover, and that's how it typically works, right? The students are mailed their actual paper diploma. They just get the diploma cover as part of the ceremony.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the photographer takes the picture of them holding up the diploma cover, right?
Well, what will happen is our focus is on videoing the student walking up on the stage, across the stage, getting their diploma, standing with the principal, and leaving. So the picture that will be taken of them and the principal on either end of that table will be from family members. Family members will have the opportunity to take a picture from a specific location in the auditorium so that they're out of the sight line of the video camera.
Okay, so we're not going to be sending them, we're not going to be sending students a picture, we're going to be sending students the whole edited video processional of their entire class.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we thought about just doing a photograph of the student and the principal, and then just using that photograph in the video for students to watch. But we just really felt like people would rather watch the student proceed across the stage and get their diploma than just see a picture of the student on the stage with the diploma.
To address what Ms. Herbert said a little while ago about teachers, would it be possible for students to invite maybe one favorite teacher to watch them go across the stage?
We can certainly discuss that. Yeah. I don't think we had thought about that. So yeah, that is something that we can consider, and we can get back to you on that. That's a really, yeah.
I think that would be very.
You think that would be appreciated by a large portion of the students?
I think even if it's not a large portion, there are some students who develop bonds with teachers, and it's just, at least for those students, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think we, need to ask Mr. Singer if we can have permission to have teachers there, because they were the integral part why they got there, and those special relationships will last forever, because you always remember your special teacher, your favorite teacher, some teacher that got you through a tough time, and they are just so important to these students. So,
and I think even if they had to be in a different part of the gym, they had to be 20 feet away, that it's still worth having them there. You agree?
if you guys are keeping the groups to, the 10 people, whether you have them in the auditorium or if you want to have them on their way out or whatever to meet up with the teacher, I mean, that certainly makes plenty of sense to me. It sounds like, right now I'm hearing the principal, 4 family members and the student. That sounds like 6. So it certainly sounds like you get out a few more people into the mix if the school system thought they wanted to.
Okay, but you'll have the videographer, right? So that's one additional.
Well, some of the teachers will be helping us staff the graduations anyway, because we're going to need people. We're going to need people to work the parking lots. We're going to need people to work the doors, the front lobby, etc. So, some of the students will get to see some of their teachers anyway, just because we naturally need to have them working during these days to pull off the graduation. But yeah, we can look at, we just need to make sure, as Ed said, that we're not having more than 10 in any one location.
And Cindy, I'm sure that, I know we've said this probably on multiple occasions, that it's all voluntary. But is there a way to, so if there are some students who choose not to come and do this, is there a way to get them into the video presentation still?
Most of when we were talking about this and Mr. King was talking to students about it, the students really felt like if they didn't choose to participate in the ceremony, that they preferred not to have their picture or something else in the video. Mr. King, did you want to add to that?
Sure, Ms. McCabe. So the one thing we did discuss was maybe listing names of students at the end if they weren't able to participate or were afraid to participate because of health issues in their family, etc. But oftentimes, even under normal circumstances, each school has students that do not participate in graduation for whatever reason, and you can fill in the blanks on all those different reasons. Okay. But yeah, that's what we talked about, was maybe listing names at the end instead of trying to put a picture in the middle of a procession, which I think would sort of ruin the professional aspect of the video.
Right. Okay. I, as long as the consideration has kind of been given to how to handle that, I think that's good.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Pictured at the end would probably be something like how you have in a yearbook where you list the kid who's not pictured at the end.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree.
All right, Donna, I still want to make a motion, so let me know when you're finished your conversation.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that. So we've talked about the logistics of what you are proposing, right? And so now let's talk about, so Kenny, you had talked about, an alternate proposal for potentially for outdoor. What I'm not sure, so I guess I'd want to think about what would an alternate proposal look like. I'm not sure that, basically the only thing that you would get potentially from having an outdoor ceremony would be that you could have more people present at one time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to wonder. I'd be curious, again, from Jackson and from you guys, like Mr. King just said. You've all done a lot of graduations, and I know what parents want. We're getting all kinds of emails and texts right now. We want to be outside. We want to be outside. But how would they feel if they were outside, but it was graduates only and family weren't even allowed to attend? Is that better or worse? I like that this has families there taking pictures. And again, my proposal would be, again, I said it 2 months ago, Powelson Field, the kids spread out, use every third bleacher and 6 feet apart. I even said, and don't yell at me, Mr. Singer, we'll call it a church service and we promise not to sing and say 7 foot apart instead of 6. But, and I do agree with you, Mrs. Herbert. I think we need to make a decision tonight on this, but with the caveat that there is going to be a letter sent to Annapolis, and let them tell us we can't do anything else. Because
Absolutely.
that's what's wrong.
Right. They have done such a great job in trying on, but I still want to give these kids another shot, you know? They deserve that. I mean, I just can't imagine it. You know, I'm very fortunate. And being through so many of those graduations, and I've seen the joy in their eyes, I've seen the joy in the parents' eyes, I've seen the joy in those teachers' eyes of what they have accomplished, because I know some of them, that's the biggest culminating activity they're going to have in their life.
But I would also like a little clarification too. I thought that was 10 people within so many square foot. So, I mean, what if we had a couple more staff members up in the balcony? Because the auditoriums are huge. So if you had a couple other staff members in the balcony, still with the 4, parent people per student, whatever. Because, I mean, that's something I think we need to make sure we have clarification on that with. And I agree with you, Ms. Herbert. We need to have this letter done. It's not just clarification regarding everything too, but, if there can be an exception to do something else, again, yeah, I understand Naval Academy is the Naval Academy. It's something a little different, but you only graduate from high school one time. Naval Academy is that's something that you choose to do. High school graduation is a rite of passage. I mean, it's something we definitely need to. We can plan now, but look and to do this, but see what could be done, I guess.
Right. So right now, I would like to make a motion that our council send a letter to the state for an interpretation of the guidance for graduation in a timely manner.
Okay, so moved, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Battaglia. Okay, so now we'll open it up for a little bit more discussion before we take a vote on that.
Can I make one comment? That as a board, I understand what you guys are doing, but for us to get our this plan done in a timely manner, our principals are going to need to start getting kids scheduled in the next few days so that they're ready for June 1st. That would not mean that we wouldn't be, if we get permission to do something else. I just wanted to put that on the record so that you don't get a phone call that my son got a time on June 2nd. Is that fair?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I don't care which order we do the motions in. I think he needs to send a letter. We need to ask as much as we possibly think we can get, and put a time frame on it. But we also need to vote tonight to approve what you guys are doing, with hopefully some additions that different people have talked about, of getting a couple more people in the gym and doing whatever. Sure. You start scheduling it.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, you guys do a lot of work, but if a week from now we found out we can do it out in the stadium with everybody there, trust me, it's going to be well worth it. But I think what Mr. Singer said, we're not the first county to ask for this, so I got a feeling we're going to get a quick answer on what it's going to be, but we got to try.
Okay.
Right, but I think that if we are going to send a letter for the interpretive guidance, I think we need to be a little bit more specific of what we're asking for. I mean, we can't just go and say, we want more. I mean, that's not going to be, of course, the answer to that is going to be no, without more specifics behind it. So I guess that's why I'm kind of pushing the question of what would an alternate plan look like.
I think we just ask for an exception to have outside.
So I mean, is what we're asking for to have it outside with everybody all at one time? Because, but just with a limit on how many folks can attend and how far apart they have to be.
And I think that's a good point. Are we better off to say each high school would have 2 graduations, A through K and L through whatever, and then it's half the crowd. You know, again, to say we want a full graduation out in the field with all the parents that want to be there, I think I know the answer we're going to get.
Right.
If we trim it down a little bit, maybe we can get a good answer. But again, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because I think, as usual, CCPS is doing as much or more than any other county I've heard of in the state of Maryland doing. So I'm not sure how much more we're going to get.
Kenny, I think that's a good point to make. I mean, you know, Howard is moving forward in a virtual format. There's a couple of other counties that are moving forward in a virtual format. Other counties are already starting to execute similar plans to what you're proposing, correct, Dr. Lockard? And your son graduated this morning in Frederick County, right?
That's correct. Yes, there's a handful of other systems that are going to this length to actually bring students in individual and walk the stage. But many are just doing all virtual, as you pointed out.
Okay.
So, board members, in the draft letter that I have prepared, and again, it is in draft, I note the number of graduating seniors that could potentially participate from each high school and the approximate stadium capacity at each high school. So for example, Century, I've got 286 potential graduates and a stadium capacity of approximately 2,500 people. It would seem to me that if, and it's a big if, the Office of Legal Counsel said that we could do something, you could certainly space 286 graduating seniors on the football field at least 6 feet apart in every direction. And you could probably space parents, guardians, family members, whatever, staff in the stadium 6 feet apart. You know, that's an issue separate and apart from the question of, is this in keeping with the governor's executive order? But I think the logistics, as you've noted, are relevant to the second question, and that is, would an exception be possible? And those logistics, you know, I intend to provide in the letter that I would send tomorrow morning. So.
Okay.
And my concern would be, a lot of people are hollering they want it outside, and Cindy, I think you said they were going to be allowed 5 family members.
4.
4, okay, 4 family members. So that's still 1,000 people in the stands. Maybe this can only be 1 or 2. You know, maybe we got to give up number of spectators to get the kids to all see each other graduate. Just a thought.
I like what Ed said. Mr. Amelia, I like that exact process you have. You know, even if it's, maybe we can go one step further, and if they don't allow exception A, do exception B, where we cut the class in half. And like Mr. Kiler had said, like whether it be A through L and then M through Z.
Well, board members, I think it's also important to remember that there will be some families that absolutely will not want to participate in this kind of gathering, and I think you have to respect their wishes there as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Maybe it's an option. It is optional if you choose to attend.
Right.
So I guess with that, we're basically saying we want to do our due diligence and make sure that we ask for the interpretive guidance from the state. And Ed, it sounds like you've got a pretty good process laid out that we're comfortable with. So if we submitted that letter to the state, and you said that you would need an expedited turnaround on that, how quickly do you think you would get an answer?
I certainly can't speak for them, but I can certainly make the ask for a turnaround within a couple of days. And I could certainly also make a call. And I don't know the chief counsel, but if he's willing to talk with me, I'm willing to make that call as well.
Okay. So if we send this letter with that stipulation that we need a very quick turnaround time, but also that we would be taking a vote on the process that Dr. Lockard and staff have already laid out and that Ms. McCabe went through in great detail, that we would basically be saying that's plan A, we're taking that, like we're going to vote on that and say we're going to move forward with that now, because in order to execute that, we would need to keep going with all due haste from now on. And if we happen to get a favorable answer from the state, then we would quickly pivot to an alternate discussion of an alternate option. Is that a reasonable interpretation of what we just said?
Yeah, I think so, and I think the phone call, if you can't do it, may help you negotiate a little bit what the letter says. But I think tonight we've got to decide we're moving this forward. We're going to hear from some people that we don't care if it happens in August, but kids are going to be away at college or where in the Army, wherever. This needs to happen relatively soon.
I agree, Kenny. I mean, I don't think that to Ed's point, I don't know if Ed is still on the line, but to his point earlier, that if you just try to delay it, he doesn't anticipate that we're going to be in a different point, 6 or 8 weeks from now, and we will have lost all of the kids that are going into the military, and I think it takes away even more from what we're trying to accomplish. So.
I'm still here. I don't think I can add any more to what you just said, though, really.
Okay.
And I think, and I just want to say, Ms. McCabe and Dr. Lockard, I appreciate and I'm very thankful for the plan. I think it's a fantastic plan. It still does what we want to see the students do. But I know we also want to see a little bit more than that possibly. And I think when the information goes out to the senior families, if they already haven't been watching to find out what's happening, we just kind of reiterate that, like, this is the initial plan. You'll be setting a time. However, please be aware that the board is working on finding exceptions to see what else we can do to keep the class together and honor them as a whole.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Battaglia. We will, I know Ms. Gaddis is listening. We are planning some communication after this meeting. So we'll be clear to say, here's some plans we're moving forward with. However, we are doing some further inquiry to check these avenues one more time.
Yes, and I just again like to thank Cindy and Eric, everybody who was involved in coming up with the plan, because again, you had a focus. Your focus was to make sure that the students got to walk across that stage and get their diplomas. So again, thanks for keeping that as an emphasis, and with having the 4 family members in attendance. I think that's great. And again, I agree with the discussion so far. I think we're just reaching. We're trying to do whatever we can to honor our students and congratulate them and send them off. So again, I think the expedited letter, if we can put that time frame in there so we would know that, we'd like to move forward one way or the other. So the sooner we hear a response, the better it will be. And it sounds like what we're saying, in the absence of getting a response, we have this one plan that we know we're going to be moving forward with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just want to do a last-ditch effort for these seniors. I mean, they deserve it. And again, I thank you, Cindy, Dr. Lockard, and your team. But I just feel I'm obligated to do this for these seniors, and especially since I was a high school teacher. I want to do this is the last ditch effort, and that's what I want to do. And I thank you all for supporting this.
Well, and again, I certainly want to acknowledge as well that, we are concerned about everyone's health and safety. But if there's a way that we can work this situation to reach a compromise or a situation that would be beneficial for the students, I think it's really worth our effort to move forward and at least take a look at it.
I agree. This really is a last-ditch effort. Let's see if there's anything additional that we can get for the benefit of our students. But if it doesn't work out, that we have a good fallback plan. And I think we need to say loud and clear that, look, we're not doing a virtual graduation. We found a way to at a bare minimum, get those kids to walk across the stage and have at least, 4 family members there to see it happen. So again, like everyone else was saying, kudos to staff for finding a way to do this. Were there any other comments that folks wanted to make?
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing, and we're saying kudos to the staff, and that goes without saying. And I know people are frustrated, but I don't think they understand this. This has been a work in progress for months. This isn't something that got decided yesterday, and now we want to do a letter. People have been talking to people. That's the point I tried to make earlier in the meeting. Mr. Singer and Dr. Lockard have been talking. They've been talking to the state. They've been trying to change stuff. We've all been hoping that we'd get a window of opportunity to get another inch out of it. And I appreciate all that. And I do appreciate Mrs. Herbert bringing up, let's give it one more shot. And if it fails, it fails, but we're going to do it.
So then why don't we do it this way? Let's take 2 separate votes. We'll just take the vote on the motion that Ms. Herbert made in terms of writing the letter, doing that last-ditch effort with the additional details that Ed O'Mealy had talked about in terms of the number of students in each class, the capacity of the stadiums, and with a time frame, with an expedited time frame. Are we missing anything?
Yeah, well stated, Donna.
Okay, then we will take the vote on that motion as just stated. All those in favor? Can I get a verbal aye, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And now we can go back to the discussion of the plan A, right? The fallback position of the recommendation that staff is making and all the details that we just went through previously. That is short of a positive answer from the state that this is how we're going to move forward with the graduation ceremony. Mr. O'Mealy, is that a reasonable statement? Should I ask for a motion for that?
No harm in asking for a motion. I think that would be preferable.
Okay. So, board members, can I ask one of you to make a motion as such?
So moved.
And I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Ms. Battaglia and seconded by Dr. Dorsey. Any other comments on that particular discussion? Any caveats that we want to make to what Ms. McCabe and Mr. King laid out previously?
I think go with what they've laid out and some comments made tonight. Can we get a teacher or 2 in the gym? Can we meet the standards that were given and have people spread out that want to be there and do as much as we can? And I think beyond that, this is not what any of us want, but a pretty good plan.
And to give them a choice of times that are suitable for them.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And I'll just reiterate one more time again, we'll communicate that we are seeking additional clarification, but in order for planning to occur and for people to have time to be able to sign up, we will need to start moving on this. And if something changes, then something changes.
Agreed. So we will be giving, by taking this vote, we're giving staff the direction to keep moving with all due haste on this particular plan. And if we get different guidance from the state, then we'll pivot at that point in time. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, board members?
Just thank
Okay,
you
good.
again to all the staff. Thank you, everybody again.
All right, then with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion as stated, can I get a verbal aye, please? Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Dr. Lockard, does that give you what you need for the plan for moving forward for graduations?
Yeah, appreciate the conversation and the challenges that it all presents. Mr. Singer, thank you for being with us this evening on the call as well.
And Mr. Singer, if you're still here, I do want to thank you for joining us as well. We realize this is a tough situation, and we're all just trying to make the decisions in the best possible way that we can.
Yep, no problem. I don't take any of it personally, that's for sure.
Hey, I have one more question. Who'd have thought? For parents listening, do the kids need to sign a waiver, or is there any special deal to get in and out of the building other than, like you said, escort, keep separate? Is that everything that's going to be required of them?
Yeah. So, we will have someone usher them into the building and make sure that, appropriate social distances are maintained throughout the process.
And Mr. Kiler also, to add to Ms. McCabe's response, because we did work through Mr. Singer on this plan, we are advertising it as just discussed this evening. People do have the option, if they're not comfortable with that, they don't have to come. But we are meeting the intent of the executive order and Mr. Singer's approval to that. So there will not be a waiver that needs to be signed.
Okay, good.
Now, just real quick, I know you had said some of the graduations would probably be between 8 and 4 and they would sign up. Are there potentially going to be any in the evening? Like normally we would have graduations at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Right.
So is there going to be any potential sign up for an evening slot?
Right now, we're hoping to get everything done between 8 and 4 because, like I said, we've got some professionals that we're working with, some contractors for the technical portion and the video portion. So we're trying to work with a lot of different people's schedules. But if we have a situation where someone can't come during the times provided, we'll do everything we can to make sure we get a time that will work for them.
So I'm just thinking, now a lot of parents are starting to go back to work now.
Right.
They're not going to be able to get off work.
Right.
That's what I'm just thinking, because I've noticed a lot of that now. A lot of parents are starting to just now get back in. Their places are opening back up. They're just been released to go back.
Sure.
And they're not going to be able to ask off work.
Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right, Ms. Battaglia. I mean, we're going to have to make some concessions for that.
Yeah, we're committed to making sure that if someone wants to be a part of graduation and they need a different time, we'll accommodate.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I think we're good on the graduation front. Dr. Lockard, do you want to move on to the next item for discussion?
Sure, and that is the 1920 school closeout procedures and plans. So as you can imagine, with everything else, we've been working on how to sort of close out the school year, and there's a lot of thought that goes into that. I'm going to turn again to Cindy and John O'Neill as we think about, we're starting to communicate some of this already through our schools to parents about scheduling times to come pick up maybe things that were belong to students that were left in the building, as well as start to return certain things. So they'll walk us through that, and then certainly want any board questions or comments as feedback for that. So Cindy and John.
So we've been working on our closeout procedures for a while. We've involved Ed Singer again in this portion to make sure that we're following appropriate safety protocol and we're addressing any health precautions. And so closeout procedures for our students will be by appointment, just like we did the laptop distribution. It will be handled very similarly to that. So right now, we have staff in buildings who are starting to bag up student belongings from lockers at the secondary school, from desks at the elementary school, cubbies, things like that. Those belongings are being bagged up with the student's name, and we are creating a schedule of appointments where families drive up to the school and we do an exchange. So families are able to give us anything that they don't need anymore. If there's a textbook or a novel or something that they had, a media center book that they had taken home with them that they're finished with, they can return that at the time, and then they will get the belongings that were left in the school building as well. This will be done without any students or parents entering the school building, and like I said, it'll be a car exchange. We will also make sure that students are able to keep their laptops during this time. So the closeout procedure for students will not involve returning the laptops yet. We may have students who need those laptops for a longer period of time during the summer, and that kind of runs into some summer recovery that is a different topic. But we want our students to be able to hold on to those laptops and continue their learning right now. So they won't be turning those back in yet. As far as teachers go, teachers will be able to come into the school building at scheduled times, following appropriate social distancing. They'll be able to close out their classrooms. They'll be provided a checklist, just like they are at every end of year, to make sure they go through the checklist and do everything that's necessary to close out their classrooms. One change will be that only the teacher will be allowed to come in and close out. So, sometimes teachers like to bring in a helper or someone to come with them to help with that clean out process. And at this time, because we're trying to keep the numbers limited in the buildings, we're asking that teachers just come in themselves to do that, just to control how many people are in the building at one time. We're also going to be mailing report cards home. So when students come to pick up their belongings from school, their report card will not be in that bag of belongings. The report cards are all going to be mailed home to all of our students during the week of June 15th. So that's how we'll be closing out the academic school year. John, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered all the major procedures. Only to say that when appointment notices go out, our principals will be reminding parents and students of all of the screening guidelines. So they'll be asked, if you have a fever, if you have certain symptoms, then please don't come in, and we'll reschedule. And for the folks, our employees in the buildings, we finally have gotten to a point where we have sufficient PPE for the level of staff we have in now. And so we do have masks and gloves and all the necessary equipment for these procedures in place. Social distancing guidelines are in place in our schools and posted. And so we'll be working to make sure our folks follow those things as they do. And then, of course, there's sanitizing protocols in place for the things we collect as well.
Any questions about our closeout procedures?
Yes, I have a question. You said, I've heard that only teachers are allowed to come in to close out. Does that include IAs or instructional assistants? that work with the teachers are not supposed to go in and help close out classrooms?
That's a great question. Actually, our IAs will be in the buildings to help close out. They'll be helping teachers, they'll be helping administrators. So yes, our instructional assistants will be an important part of the closeout process.
I just want to say I was really happy. I got the email the other day from North Carroll Middle, and picking the time slot, to be able to go in. So I know Joey is a little excited to drive with me over to the school to see his principal and maybe a teacher or two. So he is quite excited to at least get a little bit close to his school. I'm not looking forward to his gym clothes though. I'm really not. And I'm sorry for anybody that got him out of his locker. I apologize now.
Yeah, I think we've been finding a lot of things in lockers that we didn't find.
Lunch boxes. I mean, wonderful.
Okay, board members, any other questions on the closeout procedures?
On the closeout procedures? Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy, I was asking about media specialists. They'll be given a time as well to come in and diligently present on media specialists. They'll be given a time as well to come in and diligently.
It sounds like we're getting some feedback.
Yeah. But to answer your question, Pat, yes, media specialists, yes, all of our teachers and staff will have times to come in and do their closeout.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe.
If we had Steve Johnson here, he'd add that Marsha has to go in and take the air out of the volleyballs.
Oh, Marsha, I think you're on mute.
That is exactly right. My dad told me I blew the balls up in the fall and let the air out in the spring, but I really did do a lot more than that.
All right, so Dr. Lockard, I didn't hear any objections or changes to the plans, so I think you're good to go with that.
Great, thank you. Appreciate all the work behind that. Summer recovery is our next topic, and Mr. Anderson's here to provide an update on both in school and hopefully we could have some in school, but virtual if necessary plans.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lockard, and good evening, board members. I've been in communication with some of you in regards to summer recovery. Last week, I believe it was, when we spoke about summer recovery, I believe that day, it quite possibly could have been while we're having that discussion, the governor then began to provide a slow roll of doing a soft opening, if you will, in the state. And so immediately the next day, we began to think about the potential of having summer recovery face-to-face on-site in a school. And so what we do know is that it's going to be highly reliant on the state getting phase 2 of the governor's recovery plan. But with that said, we have already started working towards the idea of potentially having on-site face-to-face summer recovery in July. Right now, our plan is to have summer recovery July 6th through the 31st, no matter what. We hope, as many of you have articulated this evening, we hope to be able to have some kids in schools to provide small group instruction. And I say small group instruction because, again, our work will be directly aligned to MSDE's recovery plan, obviously, but also to the state's, the governor's state recovery plan. Whereas in phase 2, we start to see the opening of daycare centers and those types of things. And so what we are doing and working very hard to do is to come up with an option. We still have 6 weeks to go before essentially July 6th. If we were to find ourselves in phase 2 in the next 3 weeks per se, We feel like we could be nimble and agile enough to be able to provide such an on-site service to small groups. It potentially could look like 9 students to 1 teacher to keep the numbers at the magic number of 10 that we've heard and been directed and guided on. Obviously, we feel comfortable that 10 individuals in a large classroom, we would be able to provide adequate social distance and make sure that we could provide some necessary face-to-face instruction. We're very clear, and we are all of the same mindset that we want to get kids back in school as soon as possible. And if we can do it, we're going to do it. We want to figure out a way to make sure that, as Dr. Dorsey said, as a past principal and a principal myself, student safety is the #1 priority. And so we always have to lead with that, but we want to be in a position to be prepared and ready to go, and that's what we're doing. So I've been working closely with Cindy and her directors. My instructional team has been devising instructional plans that we'll be able to put in place, whether we're on site or if we have to be virtual. Obviously, our preference is to be on site because, as I mentioned last week, it's kind of counterintuitive to provide a virtual program to remedy some of the virtual holes that we've seen. So please know that we are moving forward there. I can't thank the team enough, the instructional team, curriculum, special education, as well as Judy Jones in our equity department, because we know that a lot of the students that we need to get into our buildings are the ones that are lacking connectivity, obviously also, and access. So it's been a long time for some of these students when they don't have the opportunity for a virtual environment. And we know that that's been extremely imperfect these 2 months that we've been away from our kids. So there's a lot of plans in the air. The one last thing I will say about summer recovery is that just like March 13th hit us, where we had to go from face-to-face to virtual, we will put a plan in place. And as I said, we are already started working towards that, to have face-to-face on-site instruction. However, if we don't get there in phase 2, then we'll have to flip to the virtual environment. We're looking at potentially making that decision early in June. As you all have indicated several times tonight, it takes some time for us to transition and let families know and let teachers know what the realities are. So we haven't decided an actual date, but we know it'll be early in June to make that determination. So at this time, I'm open to any questions, but I do really want to commend the staff for making this a potential reality.
So, Mr. Anderson, are we referring to all schools? And again, I think the last time we also had questioned the Career and Technology Center.
Yeah, Dr. Dorsey, we are. What we're looking at right now is obviously there's going to be some schools that are under maintenance or construction that won't be a viable option. Unfortunately, the CTC is one of those schools. Mr. Eccles and Ms. McCausland have been working with their counterparts across the state to look at alternative locations where some of these kids can get those practical hours that they need for their certifications. In some situations, we're actually discussing this with some of our comprehensive high school principals as well, where if it doesn't necessarily need some large machinery, we could go ahead and fulfill some of the requirements at an alternative location. But as I said, also, we have a number of schools that are getting maintenance projects as well. They won't be an option for us to hold a summer recovery if we can make this happen. And so in that respect, we'll have to have principals work with their peers to figure out another school in proximity to the home school of the student. But we are hoping to run as much as we can out of home schools. Once again, as we mentioned last week, it's highly reliant on the number of teachers we have available. And it'll also be our teachers, in some cases, just as the recovery plan from the state is indicated, we may be looking for some teachers to be teaching outside of a grade level they typically have been. And that's not uncharacteristic of summer types of school or interventions that take place. We really want to have the best option of have kids in front of some teachers. Did that answer your question, Dr. Dorsey?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And the parents will be providing the transportation?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So we are going to be sending out a letter to principals. I've vetted it through the chiefs today. The directors have given me great insight. Curriculum has given me great insight, as well as the many different instructional areas. We plan to provide that letter to families to see what kind of interest from our families are willing to bring their students to our school for the summer. And that, once again, is very characteristic of summer programs. The multiple counties that I've been in, and I know I talked to Cindy that historically in CCPS with summer school or a summer camp, that's been something that hasn't been out of the ordinary to ask parents to drop off and pick up. We also feel like that's probably in the best interest of the safety, once again, of our students to be able to, get our students to and from school safely without putting them on a bus and then hoping for social distancing and those types of things.
And you're looking at recovery, virtual or in school, and I think the decision's already been made. The traditional things that happen in the summer, some of the summer enhancement, that's not happening this year because everybody's focused on this, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Kiler. So such programs as our enrichment programs, not that they're not equally important, because they are, but the reality is that we know that our number one priority is to get some recovery in and get some of these kids into school. And so we want to be able to manage the school, if you will, the many things that we talked about with closeout, the many things we're talking about in regards to graduation. We want to make sure we create a safe environment where our kids can be successful. And so I will say this, that I've been on multiple calls today, that we are, like for Camp Invention and other programs that have been extremely successful over the past couple years that I've been here, there is going to be virtual options for enrichment that we'll be able to provide students as well, that those families that have registered for that. But for the most part, yeah, we were going to be looking for our buildings to be for recovery options this summer to be safe.
And also semi-related, and I probably should know this answer, but who'd have thought I got a question? The emergency meals, is that planned to continue throughout the summer at basically the same pace?
Yes, sir. So basically, I can give you a more definite answer of what that would look like. Myself and some instructional folks will be meeting with Karen next week to talk about potential locations. As you know, historically, even through the summer, we've had these locations based in different geographic areas based on the demographics of the student population in that area. Much of it is federally funded. That's how this is happening. So what we're going to be try to be very thoughtful in figuring out, okay, well, if we can only have so many locations, this is the building where we're going to have as a magnet site and potentially have some meals available for kids to take, because we are only looking to have these sessions in the morning. The CDC is saying, listen, no cafeterias, those types of things. So what we're looking to do is have a very intensive 3-hour session in the morning, and then potentially if students do qualify, there might be meals for students to take home with them as they walk out the door, a bag lunch, similar to what they're doing now.
So, Mr. Anderson, can I piggyback off of some of Dr. Dorsey's earlier questions? So first off, I want to thank you for making the distinction of, when we were talking about this at the last board meeting, how we were saying it's hard to see how doing summer recovery in a virtual format to recover from having it in a virtual format just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. But, if our hands are tied, our hands are tied. But that's not what we're proceeding with. Like we're at least trying to set out a plan to have the face-to-face summer recovery learning, because we know that that's going to be the best possible way to.
If we are fortunate enough to get back into schools and we were to reach phase 2, and Dr. Lockard would then be working with the state to let them know that this is what we're attempting to do, this could be very, very powerful. We're talking about a small ratio. We're talking about 1 teacher to 9 students. And it could be something where not only are they getting that face-to-face, but it could be a blended opportunity where kids then, as Ms. McCabe said, would still have devices that they then could take home for the afternoon or that evening and work on something in a very blended environment. So it could be a big win for CCPS if we're that fortunate.
Great. And then the other question I had was on the career and tech question that Dr. Dorsey had asked, and you had said that it doesn't seem like we'll be able to do much from the career and tech perspective because the school will be under construction. I mean, is that definitive? I mean, will all sections of the school be under construction? Are there any programs that we could get in there?
Yeah, good question. So that is something that we are exploring. And again, I'm not going to speak out of turn. I would have to obviously sit down with Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Prokoff to have a better sense and idea of what areas are going to be most impacted, right, as we do this. But we are thinking, we are planning right now, in worst case scenario, what are our other options where these kids could be getting some of their instruction and getting some of the hours towards their industry certifications.
And are we reaching out to some of our business partners in the community? Because I think that a lot of them would probably be very willing to help out if there was anything that they could do. Yeah, and again, I'm not going to say yes or no to that, because I can tell you that obviously we do have an advisory team that advises us with our CTE programs, and I'm sure Mr. Eccles is exploring that with Ms. McCausland. I can follow up with some potential options that we may have there. I can tell you with great confidence, if there's an option, they're exploring it right now.
Mr. Anderson, I certainly hope we can do the 1 teacher and 9 students. That would be wonderful. But I think more importantly, it's social and emotional well-being too. That's what I'm seeing with my grandchildren. They're and they miss their friends. Yes. And it is devastating, to them. And, and I'm just talking from a grandparent now, they do their virtual learning, but it's starting to become a fight now, they go right to their computers at 8 o'clock and do we have to do this? I want to go outside, or I want to see my friends. And I get it, but this would be a big step for those that definitely need to have help over the summer. But I think it would be a really big social and emotional benefit too.
Mr. Herbert, thank you for bringing that up, because it's an excellent point. I know Mr. Streeter and I, in our meetings, he's expressed several times, this is going to be a transition phase, right? If we have some students that are going to be invited to this that are they were dealing with social emotional issues before we even went on this break, right? How do we transition those students back in? I'm a father of a 3-year-old, right? Talk about seeing breakdowns. I see them several times a day, and I'm surprised you haven't heard one yet. But the reality is yes, that's something we have to take into serious consideration. But the benefit is to get out of the home, to get into some normalcy and some routine, right? Our fingers are crossed. But those are the things also that we're very, very conscious of and cognizant of, rather, to be thinking about, okay, well, this could potentially happen. There's a lot of logistics involved that are new to all of us. I know our directors provided a great list of things for us to be exploring in regards to, sanitation. And do we have the amount of materials necessary right now? John just shared that we're just getting to the point now with PPE. And then actual routines with using the bathroom, traveling down the hallway. I mean, we're going to be teaching these kids again. And if you ever taught first grade like I did, and I'll never forget it, those are the things that you're teaching them. So this might be something we're teaching middle school teachers, again, of how to walk down a hallway with some distance.
I was just going to say, Mr. Anderson, I caught a glimpse of CDC's recommendations for when schools are reopened, and the potential things of, one direction hallways. Well, in some of our schools, we really can't do that. It's going to be really, really like up against the locker,
Here's the beauty about some of our schools, though, Ms. Battaglia, is that a lot of our elementary schools have their own entrance right into the classroom in some cases, right? Which is great. It's grand, right? If we can have more opportunities like that. But just as Ms. McCabe articulated in and out, that could be very similar to what we're thinking. And to Dr. Dorsey's point earlier, it will be a car rider situation. It will be dropping you off, student walking into the building, one direction, getting to your class kind of thing. So ultimately, that's where we're at right now. We're very excited. We're very hopeful. We realize that's not a strategy, but we do have a strategy in place if we get to that phase 2. And again, if we're not fortunate enough to, we still have teachers identified, we still have the students identified, and we can still continue to provide opportunities for learning, obviously not in the most ideal situation.
Right. And I'm very happy to hear that, because I know, we all keep hearing, what is your plans? And it's like, well, we have to be at a certain point where we're told it's okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, because, we have 6 weeks essentially to start a summer recovery. We have only about 3 weeks of what we're guessing roughly is students with us. So this is going to be a very quick spin. We're gonna get these letters out. We're hopefully going to get some interest in families that commit, saying yes, we would love to take part in this, and then potentially stand this up and figure out what buildings. There's a lot of things to consider here. There's a lot of, obviously it's staffing and with staffing willing to commit.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you get the staffing, making sure that we can get the students there.
Yeah.
How everything will work.
Keeping ratios small.
Yes, and I appreciate all the effort. I really do, because this has not been easy. I mean, everyone wants to take the next step, but it's also like, okay, what are we allowed to do as the next step? What is permitted? I mean, as we just talked about regarding graduations, everything is what could be the next step. You don't want to plan too far out because you don't want to pull the rug out and disappoint somebody. So I know it's been very frustrating. And
so the letter that will be going out to families does indicate that we're going to be working towards, if we get to phase 2, having an on-site program. However, there will be a date that we're going to have to decide and switch to virtual. And so again, that is not what obviously we want to do. We want our kids in the buildings. However, the reality is we have to make a call at some point.
Right. Thank you.
And you're going to have to very quickly transition as soon as we do pull the trigger on that. We have to very quickly transition to, okay, now what are all of our plans for opening back up in September, right?
Well, I can tell you this, that although there's a great deal of uncertainty, Cindy's team, my team have been working to develop guidelines, looking at the latest research, looking at what all the states are doing in regards to what's good practice, and really being prepared for hopefully whatever they throw at us. That works.
Right. And Dr. Lockard, I was going to say, I know that you're thinking that we're probably going to spend the vast majority of the June and July board meetings talking about just those things, right? So, because those are going to have to be policy decisions about how we structure the day for opening in September.
That is correct. That is correct. And, we recognize we'll probably have a few more than just our regularly scheduled board meetings to get to that point. So we're getting good practice in, aren't we?
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Mr. Anderson, I just wanted to follow up again regarding summer resources. I know every time we're here, and I ask you about that because it is important to me that we make sure we keep our kids, again, don't know what's going to happen come September, but we keep them engaged a little bit some way or another with whether it's a reading program, a book a day, a book a week, or whatever, to keep them going.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have multiple online math and ELA types of resources that can be used for our students, and they have the license for that. And that's, we encourage the utilization of those resources. As you can see, Dr. Dorsey, you brought this up when Don Hicks started really building up the math lessons, and that really caught fire. So then we went with the ELA lessons. And so those types of things will continue to happen. But quite honestly, I just met with the Teacher Advisory Council this morning, and it was fascinating to hear all the success that they're having. And they gave us great ideas on how we can continue learning or opportunities for learning through the summer. So, it is certainly a work in progress. I can't commend our teachers enough. They in many places are leading us, and we are the ones serving them and figuring out how we can provide and avail. I do want to say that we're getting a ton of feedback, I'm sure as all of you are, from our families. 6,500 families replied to our family survey in regards to continuity of learning. Great insight there. We have several thousand of our families are wanting more opportunities so they can grow and be able to support their kids at home if we're in this situation, and how it is that they can better support their children. So everyone's working together. Again, a very imperfect environment right now, But again, we continue to evolve and adapt to make it better. And that's our goal.
And Mr. Anderson, I'm glad you brought up the Teachers Advisory Council meeting this morning, because that was actually a really good forum, and again, exchange of ideas and kind of a bit of a lessons learned session, right? Like what's working well, what's not working well, what do we need to do better? And it's what I've come to expect from that group. It's a really good group of folks who have great ideas and bouncing ideas off of each other. But one of the things that I did want to bring up from that meeting that also kind of surprised us was a positive unintended consequence, which was of all of this was with the special education kids, that some of them are actually thriving in this new environment of multiple platforms. If you could just make a comment or two about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. To Ms. Herbert's comment as well, there's a number of kids that quite honestly are doing exceptionally well because of the focus that they have and the anxiety. In some cases, we're seeing kids with significant anxiety because of the situation. But for some kids, and I talked to Mr. Streaker about this as well, they're doing extremely well. However, we do know that our special education population, students with significant disabilities, we're very, very, watching cautiously because I was just talking to Nick, for ESY and those types of things, it may be the best situation to continue to run virtual, to get their services that way, and for lots of reasons. You can think of them, I'm sure. The program this summer could be very differentiated based on the students that we're serving.
Right, and so we can develop that sort of hybrid approach for the populations of students that it's going to work the best for.
A lot of the struggles we're dealing with right now, aside from the social emotional, Ms. Herbert, are really the idea of, we said to students, here's your device, we're going to stand up Google Classroom, we'll avail content to you, go do it. That was great, and we were able to do amazing things there, but now we need to take the next step as a school system, and we heard from our teachers this morning, we're ready for the professional learning really to become better practitioners in a blended environment, still face-to-face, but also providing opportunities for our kids to be better prepared as we move forward. We're seeing institutions of higher learning, this is what we do, we work through LMSs, and that's really how instruction's done now, and will be done in the future.
And Mr. Anderson, I did want to also follow up on the transportation question. So I know we said that we're going to potentially be asking parents to bring their students in and provide the transportation to take out that one
variable.
Yeah. So that one variable, thank you. But what I'm curious about is what about our families who the students could really benefit from this, but their parents can't provide the transportation? Do we have maybe small amounts of bus transportation that we would be able to provide for certain kids?
So if the feedback that we get indicates that, then that's certainly something that we can be working with the operations to see what we can do. And also, we also know that there's some students that are in situations where the family does not have a vehicle, right? So, and we kind of do that work right now with our PPWs to be able to transport students to and from. But we're leading with the idea of bring your student to school, safety, convenience, and also, just to make sure that we're working efficiently to make sure everyone's safe. That's certainly something that if we see a large number of families indicating that, I'm sure we can further the conversation and see what we can do. But I can tell you right now that there's we're trying to figure out a way that we can make this happen fast. Bus routes and alternative bus routes based on where the students are living and all. It's a lot of work. I'm not saying we can't do it, but it's a lot of work, and we know that we have limited time to stand it up.
Right, and I certainly get that, and I understand and agree with the first plan of attack is to have the parents provide the transportation, but I'm just talking about those instances where it might not be possible. But I would also throw out just an idea for consideration, and I'm sure that you guys have probably already thought about it, but I'm going to say it anyway. The surf program in the summer, I do know. So my kids have been student mentors in the past, and we've actually taken the bus transportation. So there have been situations in the past where we've run summer transportation for a 4-week program, and we're gathering up small numbers of kids around the entire county. it's a time consuming thing, right? Like the kids were on the bus for a long time, but I still think it was beneficial for the small population of kids that need that service.
No argument with that at all. And again, it's if we can do it safely, where we can ensure the social distance. And again, we don't even know if students will have to be wearing masks, so there's a lot of uncertainty on what's going to be required by the student and by our teachers and by the drivers. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Any other questions? Thank you guys for your support.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anderson. Okay, so Dr. Lockard, do you have all of the guidance and decisions that you need from board members on the year-end activities, summer recovery learning plans? We know we hit graduations hard, but are there any other items that we need to address tonight?
I don't believe so, other than the ones we did on the agenda. I appreciate all the good conversation, questions, feedback. That's very helpful. And appreciate the work of staff bringing that to you as well. Thank you.
Okay, then with that, try to get back to my agenda here on. So I believe we are done with item number 3A, and we can move on to 3B, which is the Educational Facilities Master Plan document. At the board meeting, was that just last week? I guess that was just last week, wasn't it?
All blending together.
That was the marathon day where we had sessions from noon all the way through 10 p.m. We had basically said, okay, with the EFMP, we hit some very high level points, but then wanted to potentially open it up for discussion if there were any additional questions on that particular document tonight, once folks have had a bit more chance to look at it and digest it and understand the changes from last year's document. So with that, board members, I'll open it up. Dr. Lockard, did you have any other comments that you wanted to make in that regard?
I did not. No, we're looking forward to your questions, and of course have the staff here for continuing that conversation from, it does seem like about a month ago, but that was just last week. A week ago today, yeah.
And I know that at that time we had asked Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Kane to look a little bit more in depth at the FCI score and how that was going to play out. I don't know that I would have expected them to have anything available for tonight, but I'll ask if.
Sure. Thank you, President Sivigny. We're not able to take sort of a prospective master plan and retool the FCI around that, but it's not too far off to look back at your adopted CIP and what the FCI could look like under that document. This is iterative, but it's sort of a starting point. And so I think Ms. Gaddis or Ms. Bowers would be able to display the most recent FCI data that we have. I believe that's correct. I'll wait to see if that occurs. And then it's really I could defer to Mr. Kane or Mr. Prokop. I think it was really Mr. Prokop who presented that in December, but whoever wants to speak to that. Carrie, is that possible to display?
And
oh, there we go.
So, Mr. Kane or Mr. Prokop, did you want to?
Yeah, I can answer any questions. Carrie, if you could scroll to the section, it's about halfway through, that refers to the Facilities Condition Index. There we go. There we go. To the if you actually, I don't think there's a need to redo the information, but if you scroll 2 more slides, I believe the chart there, that one, thank you. That's the chart that we presented that reflects the effects of the current CIP request on the FCI over the 6-year capital plan. So I guess to sum up what the graph is showing us is if we continue down the path of major projects like the Career and Tech and East Middle, we're going to bring that FCI back down to the range in which the original request was made to maintain it at 31%. It starts to go back up again afterwards simply because, with the systems are going to continue to age out, and it's going to continue to contribute to the FCI. But this is a good start with the current capital plan. So we're in line with that. The capital plan or the facilities master plan may differ slightly from the approved capital plan. However, in the 6-year time frame, it's going to be very close to what we've already shown in terms of this predictor.
Okay, and that's going to be consistent with the capital plan that we're going to be approving tonight, right?
Yeah.
And that was with the commissioners committing to the planning phase for East Middle, as well as the planning money for the Winfield roof. Had those projects not gone through or been pushed out, that would have had an impact on this FCI projection calculation, correct?
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, from one perspective, if we slide a project out like first of all, a Winfield project isn't going to have a terribly large effect on a $1 billion inventory that we have. What's going to have an effect are large projects like East and Career and Tech. That's what's going to change this number. But if shifting it around within the 6-year, it's kind of like looking at the enrollment projections. This is the kind of thing that doesn't change dramatically by moving things around year to year. But to keep it in line with what we're seeing, the timing of East needs to be where it stands.
Right. And I mean, this is all it's all incumbent upon the additional pieces, right? Like we had said that in order to maintain that 31% FCI score over time, we needed to infuse at least, I believe it was $37 million of.
Yeah, we have another. If we were to maintain it at the time, what's happened is obviously based on the graph, you can see the FCI has begun to creep up on us. And it's one of the next slides. It might be the next one or the one after. Does show a flat FCI. There we go at 37%, just keeping it where it was or at that time in December, and we would be running at about 45 to annual investment to maintain it at that point, not to make any improvements. The next slide shows actually projecting over the long period to take it down to 31 and keep it there. And the price actually, obviously and not surprisingly goes up.
Okay. And that's why I just wanted to keep in mind, as we start talking about, the Career and Tech project and the East Middle project, and then what kind of impact that has on potential systemic projects in the next, other systemic projects in the next couple of years. We just want to make sure that we kind of are looking holistically at all of this, right? That if we're not able to do some of those systemic projects, that might have an impact on some of these projections, and just trying to keep all the variables in mind and make sure that we stay consistent with the strategic plan objective, which was to at least maintain the FCI score over time.
Yes, and the way we're looking at the plan, I mean, it's we're never going to lose sight of the systemics because we're always going to some degree or another, chase those. As Bill has mentioned a few times in his presentations, we're getting to the end of of the roofing systems that we used in the past, and what's going to happen is that cycle is going to even out a bit. HVAC is going to be in front of us for quite a while, I think. Simply because of the age of the systems that we have. So we're never going to have those off of the table. But to affect the FCI, we're going to have to concentrate on larger renovations and replacement buildings to impact it to any great deal. And there's very little we can do to affect that SCI change except invest the money.
So board members, did you have, and thanks guys for putting this up again, just to keep it in the forefront of our thinking, as because the EFMP really is the predecessor to the CIP request. So just making sure that we're keeping all eyes on the important variables. But board members, did you have any questions on this or other pieces of the EFMP?
I would like personally to thank Dr. Lockard and John O'Neill for doing a wonderful job yesterday when they talked to the commissioners. So I want to thank them very much for that.
Ms. Herbert, thank you for saying that. And also, if Commissioner Frazier is still on here, he was obviously at that meeting, and I thought did a great job of articulating the board's position and discussion points for his colleagues as well. So if you're still here, thank you, Commissioner.
And that is so true, Mr. O'Neill. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo Mr. O'Neill's comments there. Thank you, Ms. Herbert, for that, but appreciate the support of the commissioners and certainly Commissioner Frazier as well.
Thank you all for saying that. I did my best sitting on the hot seat until you guys showed up. I appreciate you coming in and straightening everything out, though.
Well, Dennis, we really appreciate your support during that meeting and giving us the time to get in there, right? So I do really appreciate Dr. Lockard and Mr. O'Neill engaging in that conversation at a very opportune time, just to make sure that everybody was on the same page with what we were trying to accomplish. That was really a great job, and we'll really be able to bring that to culmination when we take the vote under item number 4 tonight. So thank you to everyone. Board members, any other questions on the EFMP at this point? And Dr. Lockard, I know do we have a virtual hearing on the schedule for the EFMP?
Yes, we do. It's next Tuesday at 7 p.m. I want to make sure I give you the right date. I think I initially said the wrong one. It's Tuesday, the 26th of May at 7 p.m. And I believe Ms. Bowers may have already sent out that communication to our public. It's probably listed on our website as well. But that is just after the Memorial Day weekend ahead of us, which I also can't believe is this weekend.
So, Dr. Lockard, how does community participation, how do we plan for that to work with the public hearing? Is that going to be folks sending things in advance, or do we have a different plan for that?
Yes, it is. I believe we did briefly talk about this, that we will accept public comment. I know we've gotten a couple already, and that we will read those aloud during the public hearing. Because if you remember, our public hearing there's no board action that night. It's just to listen to public feedback. So it'd be kind of counterproductive to sit there and say people can't participate and we'll post their stuff. So whatever we get, we will read aloud people's comments. And like I said, we already have at least, I think, 2 or 3 that have come in. So I imagine that'll pick up a little bit.
Okay.
That's very similar to what the commissioners did with their budget hearing just recently. Is that correct, Commissioner Frazier?
Yes, that's exactly what we did. We had Ted read the comments that came in. We listened to the comments, although, to be frank, we didn't listen that night because of all the audio problems. But we listened to them before the next meeting. But it went other than the audio problems, went very smoothly.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Frazier, to that point, are those is that video posted that we could go and listen to those comments? Because I did try to tune in that night, and like you said, we weren't really able to hear much of anything that was being read that night.
Yeah, the video is on our website.
Okay. So, and Dr. Lockard, this is the next step would be then, so we have the public hearing on the 26th, and we'll hear public comment, and with the intent of this being an action item that we would take a vote on at the June meeting to approve the EFMP document.
Yes, that is the correct timeline.
Okay, and Mr. O'Neill, I'm just trying to recall, like, so we do need, from a timing perspective and those documents being submitted to the state, that does actually have to happen at our June board meeting.
Correct. It is a state requirement. By July 1st every year we submit it, and so that's why we bring it in this time sequence. You can vote on it the evening of your June meeting and approve it with or without amendments. You could certainly approve it with amendments, and Bill would make those changes before he submits it to the state by the July 1st deadline date.
Okay. And if anything material comes up in public comment or things that we want to investigate, and we don't necessarily have enough time to discuss those at the June board meeting, or I guess if we have questions in the meantime or things come up at public comment, we should get all of those questions to you so that we can try to address them all at the June board meeting.
That would be wonderful if you have that opportunity. Let us know, or let the superintendent know, and he'll let us know. Also, I think because this is somewhat unusual, it's a lot unusual how things are right now, and in the past you all typically attend the hearing or there in person. We can also compile the statements that we've received that Bill or Ray or whoever I read that night and bring those to you as part of the action item at the June meeting as well. So you can have that information in your board packet in advance to look over in advance of the meeting.
Okay. And we, as a matter of course, our board has tried to attend all of those public hearings in person. So I'm assuming that we are all going to be dialing in to listen to those comments live on the 26th. Just want to say that for the public's purpose and for ours, to make sure that if at all possible, we do want to be there to hear these live.
Very good.
Okay, board members, anything else on the EFMP? Okay, then we can move on to the next item, which is the approval of the FY21 CIP budget. So board members, I do need a motion for the approval of the FY21 CIP budget.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Battaglia.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kiler. Thank you. All right, Dr. Lockard, do you want to give us an update on where things stand?
Yes. So about a few years ago, we began the practice of asking the board to approve the final CIP budgets for the coming fiscal year when you're approving the operating budget categories. And as you know, you formally adopt your CIP budget request each October and submit it to both the county and the state. It follows their funding processes. Bringing back the final budgets after those processes conclude was a way of closing the gap between your October adoption of your request and the final funding totals. So this is an action item that was deferred from last Wednesday's meeting, so that, as we've already discussed tonight, so that further discussion and consideration of our requests for local planning could be considered by the commissioners. And as we've stated, we're pleased to share that the commissioners did consider those requests just yesterday and voted to approve local planning funding per our requests. So those approvals are now reflected in the document. In addition, periodically we go through various CIP projects and work with the county to determine which projects are sufficiently complete to close out and to move unused funds or funding or bonds from projects where they're not needed to other projects. And that process is also reflected in the totals for approval tonight. So I'm going to ask Mr. O'Neill to display that information and review that with you so that the board can then work through any questions and move to adoption.
Thank you, Dr. Lockard, and I hope that I am displaying it now. This is the first time I've tried to do this, so I trust that it's on the screen. This is not a long presentation, I promise. It's just literally 2 slides beyond this cover. And on the second slide, or 2 from now, the last slide, is when we'll ask you to vote on the overall totals. But in order to sort of give you a frame of reference for that final vote, we did want to show you sort of the itemized list of the projects that are in your FY21 capital budget, now that it has been through that entire process at the state and county level that Dr. Lockard just detailed. And so these are the projects one by one. I'll try not to read each one of them to you because I think you already understand them. Of course, the big one that's starting now is Career in Tech. We hope to bring that bid to your June meeting, and then that work will begin this summer. And you can see the local and the state participation. That is the first year of state construction that was secured through this year's project. The next several projects that show reductions, the ones in parentheses, that those are numbers being reduced out of those projects, that starting with South Carroll roof and ending with Runnymede roof. These are the projects that Dr. Lockard just referenced that periodically we'll sit down with the county staff. Mr. Zaleski spoke to his accountants and Mr. Hartlove's team and Mr. Prokop's team, and we'll go through projects and say, okay, these can now be closed out, or certain amounts of money in them can be closed out. They're sufficiently complete. They're out of warranty. There aren't any real outstanding questions, that sort of thing. And when that time is right, we can go ahead and take this action in concert with the county. And so that's I think that's just a good example of how things do work here and how we work together to try to maximize the most we can and in terms of local resources. And so what you see here in terms of dollar amounts is not cash. So it's not money that you could just simply decide as a Board of Ed to immediately spend somewhere else. This basically reflects dollar amounts associated with unissued bonds that did not need to be issued at the local level to complete these projects because they came in under budget or under cost at bid or in terms of the work itself. And so what we're able to do with the county folks is to look at this availability, and then it gives them greater flexibility as they look out through that 6-year window of time and what there is bonding capacity or funding capacity for. So in this case, these unissued bonds can be rolled into the Career in Tech project to help with the local portion, and you see that's what that footnote represents. So Career in Tech and then those projects being sort of cleaned up go hand in hand. Then you have the East Middle modernization project. That $4.5 million is the amount that Commissioner Frazier so eloquently expressed yesterday, and the commissioners ultimately voted to include. And so that does put you on the time track we've talked about so much lately, including beginning with the joint meeting with the commissioners. Then you see Winfield Roof, same thing. What you do see here, though, that's not the planning money. We talked about requesting the planning money. What Mr. Zaleski's done and the county's approved, the commissioners voted yesterday to approve, is just to include the entire county allotment. So that's planning and construction all in one. And that's not unusual for a system like a roof replacement because, first of all, it won't move forward unless the state fully commits for the remainder. But secondly, if it does move forward, it gives us, the Board of Ed, the school system, the flexibility to move right from planning into the lead work for construction that next summer. So this actually is something that's been a strategy that the county has worked with us over the last several years to make projects keep flowing from planning into construction as long as both funding entities both funding agencies fall into place. So that's what you're seeing there. The next few technology paving and relocatables, these are local only CIP projects, so you would not see any state money there. There is no state money to be had there. And so these are projects that the county had already had in their plan when Ted and his folks first released it back in January as a preliminary discussion. And those numbers are relatively consistent with where they've been funding us back and forth over time. The next three are the ones that you grappled with at your budget session and your budget vote. These reflect the money that you are appropriating from fund balance into local CIP projects. So that's those three are the discussion you've had the other night. And it may be too far back to remember a detail like this, but the very last one, Aging Schools, that's a state formula program. Historically, it's not something that we showed in the CIP because it's not a state bonding program. It's sort of a cash program based on a standard formula that they have in place. But a couple of years ago, they asked us to begin to make sure that it's visible in the local CIP. And so there's nothing new or different about that, except that the state is asking us to show that as a project line in the local CIP. So that's all of the individual line items that will roll into the total budget amounts on the next slide. And that's what we'll be asking you to approve is the next slide. I'll flip to it just so you can see it, but then we can pause there and ask if you have any conversation, any discussion, or any questions about anything we've said or any of the items listed one by one that equate to these numbers.
Okay, board members, any questions?
Yeah, East Middle, you guys have been moving forward on the hopes that we would get the right vote yesterday. When will that planning, that architect, when will that come to us for award? Will that be June or not till July?
That would be June as well, I believe. If that's not correct, Mr. Prokop will pipe up and correct me, but that's been our plan all along, and that's not a defiance of the county. We simply had to be on that timeline just in case funding was approved, and so that's been the plan the whole time. If the county hadn't approved that yesterday, then that award of bid simply would not be brought in June. But that's the pace we've been on, and so we're still on course for that. Everything has now fallen into place. And that would be your typical, if you think back through your career and tech project, it's going to follow those same steps. So that's what we call the A&E bid, or the architectural and engineering services bid that will get you started in that planning and scoping process that you've just so recently stepped through stage by stage with career and tech. Other questions? If not, or even as you're thinking, this is the slide that ultimately we would hope maybe you could entertain a motion to approve. This takes those projects on the prior screen and sort of rolls them up into local revenue. It does detail the reappropriation from closed out projects, and it does also detail your fund balance decision to use fund balance to populate those projects. And then it also lastly includes the state dollars for both career and tech and the Winfield roof.
The fund balance decisions, that will need to be approved by the commissioners also, and what's the timing of that?
How that will work, and to be honest, and I hate to do this because I've been complimenting him so much, so I hate to put you on the spot, Commissioner Frazier. I wasn't 100% sure yesterday if you all discussed that and sort of gave Ted the nod, or just discussed it for understanding, knowing that when you vote on your overall budget to incorporate the Board of Ed's budget request, all of those things would be approved. I felt like I saw Commissioner Weaver make a motion and then it was approved, but I wasn't 100% sure on that. But to your question, Mr. Kiler, and I'll let Commissioner Frazier answer that if he wants, but to your question, when the commissioners vote on the overall county budget on, I think, May 26th in the morning, and that overall vote incorporates your budget request, then those appropriations will happen, as that'll be the vehicle by which those appropriations happen. And on July 1, those fund balance amounts will be allocated to those particular CIP projects.
I'll just have to chime in and say you're correct. We're planning to have that vote on the morning of the 26th, and with the understanding that everything that's in your budget that you've given to us is approved at that point.
Very good. Thank you so much for that clarification. And that'll be true of the other fund balance uses as well, Mr. Kiler. Here we're dealing with the capital, but those decisions you made, those appropriate amounts of funds will then be allocated effective July 1 into the operating budget categories that Mr. Hartlove had on the screen later that night that you voted on.
Yeah, yes, and then also if 4 months from now you need fund balance for something else and propose it, then that would go individually to also, we'd approve it, and then the commissioners would have to approve it.
Correct. And I think Ted got this question the other day with his board, and he explained it the same way. If it's part of the overall budget adoption, as is the case right now, then it's adopted into the budget itself. It's part of the whole thing. Explained, hopefully explained well so that everyone who's voting understands. If it's something that comes up in the middle of the year, then that's what we call either a budget transfer or a budget adjustment. In this case, it would be an adjustment, and you would an individual item would come for your action first because it's your fund balance as the Board of Ed. And then under state law for all school systems in Maryland, any budget adjustment or budget transfer that you, the Board of Ed, approves, it has to then be submitted to the county commissioners for them to act on within 30 days of your vote. So that's how that works. And in fact, the year-end transfer that you voted on at your last Board of Ed meeting is on the commissioner's agenda tomorrow. So there's an example of how that sequence happens.
Thanks.
Sure.
All right, so board members, any other questions before we take the vote on the CIP? Okay, not hearing any, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor, if I can get a verbal aye, please.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And again, thank you so much, John and Dr. Lockard, and shepherding this through the process, and to Commissioner Frazier for helping us queue up our concerns and the items that we wanted to address with the commissioners. Really appreciate the collaboration on all of this. And I think we made some decisions along the way that I think in a normal time period we wouldn't have made, but I think we're making the best with the situation we've been dealt. So I want to thank everyone for all their hard work and effort in getting to a positive conclusion to this whole process. Okay, board members, any other comments? Any other new or unfinished business that we want to address tonight? No? Okay. Then with that, let me get back to my agenda document. So the meetings that are upcoming, we talked just a bit earlier about the public hearing with the EFMP on May 26th at 7 p.m. in a virtual format. And our next board scheduled meeting is 5 p.m. Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. And it will likely be virtual as well. And with that, I will thank everyone for the robust discussion again as part of this special board meeting, and stay tuned as the situation changes and we get updates along the way. Dr. Lockard, I'm not sure if you're anticipating that we would have another meeting potentially before the June 10th, or we're assuming that June 10th is going to be our next board meeting.
I am assuming that, but that's always subject to change depending on, what's happening. I do want to let everybody know too, we are planning some system-wide communication either late tomorrow or Friday, just to update folks on kind of things that have been happening lately. I know schools have been doing a great job of communicating, and we don't want to inundate people with tons of communication, but we want to keep people up to date. We are still awaiting, we submitted the waivers for the last day of school after last week's meeting. We have every reason to believe that's not going to be an issue for our students. We firmly believe June 11th is going to be our last day. I can't say that with the official stamp until I get it from the state, but I don't have any reason to believe it's not. We are also in the process of finalizing that last staff day. We're working on that as well. We will be able to get that to staff very, very shortly. It should be right after the student last day, but we are working with our associations, and we had an election day that we had to move around and manipulate in there. So should be able to announce that very soon. And it's, like I said, we're just kind of waiting for these official things to fall into place. But at least right now, that's what I want to make sure that everybody knew. We'll provide updates on the graduation conversation. We'll provide updates on summer learning to our communities. We'll provide anything new or different we've talked about in the last few weeks, so the community is kept up to speed on all that's happening.
All right, everyone, thank you so much. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Herbert.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Dr. Dorsey. All those in favor, can I get a verbal aye, please? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your week and a wonderful holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.